Hello, everyone. Okay. Uh, I am going to attempt to communicate some transmissions I've been receiving through a couple different ways. I have spent most of my life as a writer, but I have been struggling ever since I started working more directly with astrology and the other realms. I've had trouble putting that into writing. And so I'm going to try to also write a piece that maybe brings in a little bit more of the language, the transits, the specifics. Can't even say the word. But in the meantime, I just wanted to share some things that have been coming through. So I kind of started working with astrology basically just by directly communing with the planets. And it started by communing with the moon when I had experienced a really severe injury, was paralyzed for about 6 months, and was in a remote place and didn't really have anyone around me most of the time and would spend hours and hours early in the morning just sitting with my cup of cacao and wheeling my wheelchair to the open door and just communicating with the moon. And then I would find myself sort of like receiving transmissions that felt like they were coming from outside of me. And later I would look up whatever the current astrology was and it would align. So this forms the basis of what now is becoming more of a formal practice and offering, where I'm learning the language to, kind of communicate that. But these are abilities that we all have. We all are beings with bodies that are made of water, mostly, and other things. We have our own unique vibratory frequencies that connect and align with other frequencies in the earth, in the heavens, and all the things around us. So, yeah, but we're humans and we need to make meaning out of things. That's kind of part of how we navigate this realm of the earth. Um, and so we have a lot of stories, and a lot of them follow this arc of the hero's journey, right? Uh, there's a main character that has a quest, a mission they need to fulfill, and they go along their journey. They get the call to leave their normal life behind. They leave home, and they meet other beings and guides who uh, help them along the pursuit of their mission. Along the way, they are tested and challenged. Their faith in their commitment to their path is shaken. They may refuse the call, they may go home, they may come back out. Whatever the case, eventually they have to face their darkness. And through that, they are transformed and put back on the rightful path to healing and eventually emerge victorious and and eventually return home with the knowledge and the elixir and the gold and the treasure and whatever your metaphor is. They get the girl, you know, they win the day. But that's kind of a patriarchal framework. I think there's a lot of other stories and cosmologies and mythologies that are more rooted in the earth, um, indigenous worldviews and non-dual traditions that see that the story is always playing out and there's just different chapters, different cycles, different phases that it moves through, and not all of them end happily. The hero doesn't always win. And like, what does winning even mean? Because ultimately it's all part of one big story that's much, much larger, much longer timeline than we could even conceive of. So I had planned right now to be on a trek through a bunch of different sacred sites in Guatemala with my teacher, who I've been working with on the Maya cosmology for years, that I really deepened into practice with when I had that injury. Um, so for years, I'd been wanting to come on this track, this journey that he leads, yeah, through the sacred sites and timed with important ceremonial days in the Maya calendar, the Maya ceremonial calendar, the sacred calendar. Um, yeah, so I thought I was ready for that physically. And that was kind of the main reason that I came out to Guatemala at this time, in this moment. And the theme of the trek was the hero's journey, based on the story of the hero twins in Maya mythology. Uh, and yeah, my contribution to that particular hero's journey, the one that I embarked upon with my friends in that container, uh, my journey turns out to not have gone all the way to the end. My hero's journey came through losing, not winning, not getting to the end or the top of the mountain, or but I found the elixir, I found the gold, I found the medicine that I needed. Yeah, but for me, it was in allowing myself to be defeated, which is actually part of the mythology of the hero twins. It just depends, like where you pick up the story, right, and where you leave it off. So, at one point in that story, the hero twins, they go into the underworld to face the lords of death, um, and they're put through all kinds of tests. And eventually, they realize that they can't outsmart them, um, and that in order to contribute to the longer term mission, the bigger picture goal of like saving the world, that they have to sacrifice themselves. And so they do. They die. Uh, and you could end the story there and say it's a tragedy, but that would be not looking at the longer timeline. So I experienced on this hero's journey that the pace of the trek was much too fast for me. Um, it was lots of moving around. It was going to sacred sites, but it was almost kind of like a let's see as much as possible. And there was a limited timeline. There were lots of places to go to in order to have this kind of coinciding with the important dates of the calendar in these different places. At those certain times. So, um, it's been 2 years since I was injured. I felt like I was more recovered than I was. And at one point, I was getting there. But I did this master plant dieta in Peru a few months ago, and that really, it may have liberated my soul in many ways. But again, I had to really sacrifice my body to get there. Um, Whether or not that was maybe the smartest path for me in this time, I don't know. It was the medicine I needed because it got me where I needed to go. But I think that's just because, yeah, I was pretty getting back into the illusion again. So I wasn't able to keep up. Um, in the process, I also was observing myself playing out another pattern, which I think a lot of us can probably relate to. It relates to those of us like raised in families with maybe narcissistic parents or parents with addiction and codependency. Um, I think anyone who is born into a capitalist consumer driven system experiences some form of this trauma as well. Um, and it's definitely pronounced for queer and trans people and people of non white privileged European backgrounds, that we are expected to play certain roles. We're expected to perform. And success in these contexts looks a very certain way. Um, we kind of grow up learning that there's winners and losers. There's certain groups that have the power and certain groups that don't. So winning and losing, that's kind of a sun thing. That's kind of a Venus and Mars thing. Um, Power dynamics relate to Pluto, and all of like the personal planets are very closely tied to these karmic cycles um, that play themselves out in our astrological charts through the nodes. So the eclipses are the points where the sun and the moon meet, and they kind of are these points of destiny, points of fate. Um, and we also recently have been having, yeah, this kind of giant mass of planets, the personal planets, Mars, Venus, Mercury, that are moving in a stellium or cluster very closely with the moon and the sun. Well, the moon is always moving because the moon changes signs every few days, but moving with the sun, especially. And everything, yeah, kind of converged around this most recent eclipse that we had, which also happened in the axis of Pisces and Virgo. And that's the same part of the zodiac, the same areas of our life that were highlighted with the last eclipse last fall. So if you think back to September of 2025 and you think about kind of what you were dealing with then, you might find some of those same themes coming up again. And those signs in general relate kind of to this duality that also is playing out through another big transit happening right now, the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries. All of these things are kind of about this duality, this dance we have to navigate between our bodies, uh, the structures that we build for ourselves as humans, the expectations, the limits placed upon us, maybe real or imagined, um, and the interaction between that and our dreams and our goals and our aspirations, between that and our spiritual dimension, our ability and desire, whether conscious or not, to transcend those limitations because we are spiritual creatures too, right? Like we are bodies, but we are also souls. And our souls have hero's journeys. And each lifetime has kind of is kind of a chapter in that larger story. I know I've talked about this before. And the nodes represent those points of destiny. So the north node represents our dharma, the resolution of the south node, the karma that we came in with, which doesn't mean punishment. It just means like that's the stuff we've inherited from the culture, from our families, from our previous lifetimes. And it's the stuff that our soul decided it wanted to learn about. And there's a few different timelines to look at that through. There's this lifetime, there's a larger story arc that goes across multiple lifetimes. This is at least according to evolutionary astrology, take it or leave it. Um, and also Buddhism, and also lots of traditions, um, and Vedic astrology. But I don't really know that system, so I don't want to speak for it. And then there's like the long, long game, which is the whole planet, cosmos, this whole dimension, this whole Earth thing that we all decided to do. um, so in this sub timeline of this sub timeline of this sub timeline, I really wanted to go on this journey. I really wanted to be the hero that made it all the way to the end, that went to the top of those mountains and had these beautiful experiences of spiritual connection, of transcending the day to day through a very practical, grounded relationship with ceremony and with earth and with time and place, which is what I practice anyway. Uh, but you know, we're also kind of conditioned that the peak experiences, the top of the mountain is where we're going, that that's where all the answer is, that that's where we need to get to be whole. And that's only one part of the story. Uh, I had an insight come to me on one of my travels it was the trip that made me decide to be a nomad, actually, where I was in Petra, another sacred site in Jordan, and there was a lot of people leading donkeys up the mountain and a lot of, you know, people taking rides up because it was very steep and it was very, very hot. Um, and I kept being offered rides on camels, donkeys, horses, everything. He kept saying, no, no, no. And eventually one guy was like, why not? And I was like, it just came from outside of me. And I was like, the point is to walk, not to be at the top. And that's it, right? It's the journey. But it's also the destination because there are these moments of peak experience where everything makes sense. And maybe they happen at the top of a mountain, and maybe they happen in the pits of hell. It's all part of it. And if we're only focused on achievement, which is what, a lot of our cultures and families teach us, if the only thing that's considered valid is when you can produce something from it, or when you can make money from it, or when you can be recognized from it, or when there's a summit you've reached, right? Something you can point to, then you're going to be disappointed a lot because that's a very small aspect of life. So even though I know all this, I wanted to get to the top of those mountains. I wanted to go with my new group of friends and make this journey. And I was so excited. It was sites that I'd wanted to visit since I was a little kid. And I thought I could do it, but that wasn't me listening to my body. That was me, Mercury getting in the mind. Mercury rules um, Virgo, which is interestingly related to the body, but also habits and daily routines. And it's also very focused on like analysis and organization. And so almost kind of like representing the way to rationalize your way out of things that your body might be telling you. The moon is our body because the moon changes signs so often that the moon is very linked to our present experience. Like what's happening right now? Okay, great. We've got all these larger stories. Okay, great. We've got this larger journey we want to go on. But what's happening right now? And Pisces is, a sign that is also its modern ruler is Neptune, but um, the traditional ruler is Jupiter, who is the god of expansion and knowledge and philosophy and spirituality, but also the really, really ancient god of the forest. Um, Pisces is a water sign related to the moon in that way, then, because the moon controls the tides, related to the tides that we're all navigating day to day, right? How the waters of our body are moving in the present moment. Mm. And the messages that my body had been giving me in the days leading up to this trip were that I don't know if I can do it. And then I thought that was just doubt and that was just fear. And like, yeah, there was some of that. Um, but I was ignoring real signs like pains in my legs and extreme fatigue and trouble sleeping and all these things. And I just really wanted it to be something I could overcome, transcend. But Neptune's also related to illusions, and that turned out to be an illusion. And once I got out of the kind of day to day and away from my laptop and away from the hustle bustle and all the Virgo distractions, I realized that I was really, really, really tired. I was tired. I was hungry. I was sore. And I think I've been moving through that state and ignoring it a lot of the time for many years, which again, this is something that with trauma we learn to do, right? We repress, which means it never even enters our consciousness. It happens to our body and the body just pushes it down because in the past it hasn't been safe to feel that thing. Or we suppress it, which means we become aware of it and then we're like, that's fine. And we push it down. Either way, it's not something that's factoring into our like day-to-day conscious decision making, which puts it in the realm of Pluto, subconscious, the deep, deep down below. It's also, yeah, the realm of Pisces, the realm of Neptune, the realm of the outer planets, right? Things that are far away from our daily experience and our conscious awareness. So the nodes in evolutionary astrology and Vedic astrology, again, blah blah blah, lots of philosophies and belief systems. They kind of bring together this interaction of like our day-to-day experience, our human experience, the personal planets, specifically Mars is really important, and Venus, and yeah, Mercury, because Mercury is the messenger, the go-between, the psychopomp who could move between the underworld and the realm of the gods and the realm of hell, the unknown, the subconscious, the scary, and whatever, just the things that we're not aware of. And in the realm of the earth beings. Um, the nodes are intersection points of Earth, personal planets, which includes the moon and the sun, and um, the outer realms, represented largely by Pluto and Uranus as well. They're all important, but Uranus and Pluto kind of tend to factor in most prominently, especially Pluto. Because Pluto is like the closest outer planet, right? So it's kind of, again, Pluto's kind of a psychopomp in a way, an intermediary. Um, Mars represents our ability to get what we want. Uh, I know I've said some of this stuff before, but just to refresh, Venus, is representing. Ooh, there's a really cool blue bird over there. Venus is representing our desires, attraction, repulsion. Um, what we value is related to Venus, how we value ourselves, resources. In ancient Rome and dating back to other ancient civilizations before that, including like Babylonia, Venus represented victory, which included like the victory of battle. As I've said before, like the personal planets today in pop astrology are looked at as very binary, but they were never like that for ancient societies. Like there were two faces because these planets move in these very complex orbits that, yeah, they have morning and evening star phases, and that's for another that's for other containers, and I have talked about it before, and I'll do more on that as well. But basically, it just relates to when they're visible in the sky. Um, the eclipses are basically points where the sun and moon meet up in various configurations as they all intersect with the Earth's orbit. So it's kind of like our desires, our drives, our motivations, the ways we're going about trying to achieve our desires, both conscious and unconscious. Um, it's like where all those things meet and where they meet with our karmic destiny and where they meet with the longer timeline. So it's basically like, here's the, I don't know, if we're looking at life as like the TV series or something, as I described this in a previous video, it's like the previously on. Eclipses are almost like previously on your life. And the life of our cosmos. And in some of these more complex series, especially, right, they'll show scenes from previously on. You're like, oh yeah, I forgot that was from like season 3. Now we're on season 8. I totally forgot about that character and that whole thing. And you'll see the preview of that, and then you're like, that's about to happen, and something's gonna relate to that in this episode. Okay. I think eclipses are almost kind of like that, where it's like you're remembering things you're getting, and there's also just other inflection points in our life where based on our transits, our alignments, when our personal planets and outer planets interact with the personal and outer planets moving through the sky, there are these moments of like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And sometimes those are like in this lifetime, and sometimes those are beyond this lifetime, and they're part of like the longer storyline that includes multiple lives that we come into this one without conscious awareness of, unless we're like a very highly trained yogi or something. um or they're part of the big 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 picture that isn't even factoring into our awareness. um and so you'll get these moments sometimes, right, where like deja vu is one of these things, or you get these sort of like premonitions or inklings of like, ooh, I don't think I should go down that road, or like, maybe I shouldn't start this relationship with this person, even though I'm really attracted to them and everything seems like it's pointing in the right direction. Or, yeah, it doesn't have to be bad either. Sometimes you'll get the like, I just feel like I'm supposed to do this thing and I don't know why. And maybe it's the opposite, right? Like everything's pointing to that this is a bad idea, but it just feels right. And that's part of this larger intuition that we have as beings with larger mythic journeys. Uh, and it's also tied to this larger principle that is actually evidenced in quantum physics. Like in quantum physics, is called retrocausality, and I might butcher this. I kind of learned about retrocausality and its intersection with astrology from Rick Levine, who's just a living library, total genius. Highly recommend his YouTube channel and Patreon and all his stuff if you're not familiar with it, but let's see if I can do it justice. Yeah, basically, retrocausality is experiencing the effect of something before its cause has happened. And this all goes back to the idea of like time isn't linear, right? And kind of going back to where we started with like heroes' journeys, right? Like there isn't a clear beginning, middle, and end for any slice of this story. And yeah, we're always kind of picking up in the middle of something. So experiencing the effect of something before it's happened in this timeline, again, is kind of deja vu, is the intuition. And it's because everything is kind of simultaneously happening and hasn't happened yet and is about to happen. That's going to get us into a whole nother direction, though. To me, this relates to karma and dharma and this aspect of the conscious versus the unconscious, the soul playing out desires. So, yeah, evolutionary astrology basically says that like our karma dharma, our paths through this lifetime are um, propelled forward by desires arising, being explored, being played out to their fullest, exhausted, released, and then new desires arising, and that kind of drives us forward through lifetimes. Um, that the physical human 3D experience is really based on this idea of sort of desire. And you could also look at this as like attraction, right? And there's sort of a more like physical 3D way of looking at that as well. Um, quantum physics kind of describes all these interactions with the concept of waves and particles, and that you've probably heard, maybe if you're a nerd like me, of like the particle wave duality idea, where everything in the universe is like both a particle and a wave at the same time. Um, basically, the universe is composed of vibrations, of frequencies, of energy. Um, again, we are individual people, individual stories playing individual timelines. You could look at that as like we're individual particles riding larger waves of experience. You can look at it as music, we're notes in a larger song, symphony, melody. There's all these different parts and different layers. It depends what level you're observing it at. So, quantum physics particle wave duality says that if you're looking at something, you back up, everything's moving through the universe as this wave and this flow and this interrelated dance of like bigger timelines, bigger stories, bigger interactions. It's all flowing, it's all interacting, it's all relational, it's all based on how we're aspecting and interacting with and transiting different other particles and waves and things in our universe and our galaxy and our Earth. But because it's all relational, because the symphony is made up of a bunch of different individual contributions, because the story is made up of a bunch of individual characters converging at places and times, and having interactions, aspects. Maybe you heard of aspects in a natal chart. That just means to see in Greek. So as we're moving about through the zodiac, as we're moving about through our storyline, as we're moving around the wheel of the year, the seasons, we run into each other, right? Sometimes we encounter each other, we see each other, and that makes something happen. That causes an event at a place and a time. The meeting of frequencies at a certain place and time causes something to manifest, be made physical, be made real. um, one storyline gets activated, there's an episode of the show that starts happening. Um, and that it is the act of observation that turns it from the flowy, flowy wave into the particle, the physical thing that we can see and experience. Our bodies, our events, our happenings. There are a bunch of different things coming together, things from our mom, from our dad, from the culture, from whatever, coming together at a certain place and time, bam, becoming a body. They were observed by the heavens, by the cosmos, by our parents. And all of a sudden we took a form. We assumed a form. Great James Blake song, Assume Form. Yeah, I think the first lyric is, I will assume form, I'll leave the ether. That'll get me down a whole other tangent though. Ether, the fifth element, the physical manifestation of space, which we've been taught is empty, which nothing's really empty. And yet everything is. Yeah, so that there's something about, this is how the retrocausal principle comes in. There's something about seeing something that can actually change retroactively the pattern, the trajectory that a thing, a particle, a wave, and a cast of characters in the episode of the show moving about their business. Oh, all of a sudden they encounter another group of wanderers, or one army encounters another army, and then that changes the trajectory they were on. Something different happens. But the idea is that observation doesn't, like, time isn't linear. So observation doesn't only change things for the future, it can also change the past. And as Rick Living says himself as well, like, that's what therapy is, right? And this is what I've personally experienced with a lot of the techniques that I work with, like internal family systems therapy, any form of self-inquiry, compassionate inquiry. I think there's a time and a place for talk therapy, and it plays a role in those other frameworks as well. Um, Someone else observing you, but you have to observe yourself. And you can't just tell the same story over and over. You have to go back in time to the moment where the trauma happened that you're currently experiencing a new wave of. And you have to observe that in yourself to bring it into the present moment. Because these traumatic patterns, our bodies carry them. We generate some of them through the actions we make in this lifetime. Some of them just come through us based on the other people and storylines and timelines in our culture, family, etc. But for them to be resolved, they have to be made into a particle. They have to be made into a physical experience in our body. The things that are in our subconscious, as Carl Jung said, rule our lives, and we call them fate. If they're subconscious, if they're in the realm of Pluto, we don't know about them by definition. Uh, they're running through our bodies as waves, but we're not observing them. So they're not particles. They're not something we can grab onto. They're waves moving through us. And just like the waves of the ocean and the tides, they're influencing us. And we're making decisions and we're doing behaviors and going into old patterns based on the similarity, the resonance of those vibrations. But if we can observe them, if we can make them a thing that we can grab onto, that we can see, now they're real, now they're here, now there's something that we can work with. uh, and in doing that, and I think that healing often involves, like, yeah, talking to the past part of yourself or the ancestor who maybe passed that down to you. It doesn't have to be just you. Um, by interfacing with these other happenings, which may be our events, which may be our places, which may be our spots in nature, which maybe are like trees. And, um, our plant allies can help us with this, right? Because they are carriers of these wave patterns as well. And if we're aligning with frequencies that are carrying those same timelines of trauma, then I think we can see them better, right? When we're encountering other beings that share our resonance, whether they're plants or planets or people, then we have the ability to make that pattern, that story, that wave, a particle, a plot line, a character that we can work with, that we can befriend, that instead of it being some scary thing in our Plutonian realm that just keeps coming back and, oh, why am I doing this thing again? Again, I thought I had addressed this. The roots are deeper. But the beauty is that once we do that, we can change the past. Um, and that's how we can move forward. Mars and Venus kind of represent our acting in the moment on what we think we want. But that's just based on what we can currently observe. So sometimes sometimes that is very simple. I am hungry. I feel a feeling in my body that is hunger. And okay, I'm going to make an action to get what I want. Mars, I'm going to make a sandwich. I'm going to eat it. Fulfilling the desire, Venus. um, and maybe that is a very small karmic timeline that is, made conscious, observed, resolved quickly. But these larger ones, these longer ones, require the participation of the subconscious actors and the other timelines as well. I don't know that I explained that well, but anyways, let's go back to the hero's journey. So I observed myself finally doing some patterns that I've been doing without realizing it for many, many years while I was on this trip. While I was on this trip to the sacred sites, I felt that my value, Venus, was not the same as the other people's on this trip. I thought that I did not deserve to be there subconsciously. um, I felt like I wasn't smart enough, like I wasn't spiritual enough, like I didn't know enough. I observed the other people in the group as being more evolved, more successful, more healthy, more smart, more whatever. And so, in this place and time, based on the interaction with these people and based on a lot of realizations I got through the eclipse by just kind of sitting and communing with the moon. And yeah, just I've been working with these patterns. I've been making little bits of it more conscious and kind of being like, why do I feel this way? Um, I eventually realized that I was trying to be what I thought everyone else wanted me to be. I was performing, I was playing a role. The sun, Leo, my moon is in Leo. And my natal sun is in Sagittarius. And so, yeah, I've kind of learned to act smart, to fire hose people with information, to try to convince them that I know what I'm talking about because I doubt my own knowledge, my own ability, my own value, my own worth. Um, and I try to convince other people because I'm trying to convince myself. Um, and because I want to be liked and I want to be accepted in the group because that's part of being human. um, and as a result, I overdo it, Jupiter, and Jupiter is stationing direct very soon. So we've been looking back, maybe, right, on ways that we felt like we were too much or not enough in certain situations. That's a Jupiter signification and also related to Venus. Um, the value we place on our knowledge, our generosity, our ability to give and receive. Um, and a lot of us, especially those of us who are neurospicy, who are different from the mainstream in some way, and again, just really anyone born into consumerism, it's like, you're not enough. You need to consume more. You need to be more. You need to achieve more. It's like you both need to have more sun, more Mars, more drive, more achievement, and more victory, Venus. And you need to receive more consumer products to put out into the world, Mars, those, those sun significations of success, house, car, job, title, money, whatever, these observations that we think make us real, because that's what we've been told. But that's not the journey of the soul. Um, the journey of the soul looks at the larger picture that involves all of us, that is not based on an individual achievement. Um, we all have individual contributions. But if we're focused on the ego and only me, and we're not looking at the relationality, if we're looking only at the particle and not the wave or the whole, if we're looking only at one character or one episode, and we're not looking at the whole story, then we're never going to get to the end of the hero's journey. We're never going to get to the top of the mountain. We're never going to have our desires met. Um, we're never going to feel safe. We're never going to feel resourced. So, yeah, I observed this pattern in myself, and I tuned into the moon, and I connected to nature. And man, I tried to keep going, but my body spoke to me clearly and kind of just stopped cooperating. I fell down one day, was able to kind of pick myself up and keep going the next day. And then the day after that, my leg just wouldn't work. Wouldn't work. Tried to get out of bed, couldn't walk. So our bodies will speak to us eventually. Saturn, Neptune. We have limits. And yeah, I mean, these are the karmic points, right? There are certain episodes, there are certain characters, and not everyone goes all the way to the end. And even the hero, has limitations. So I had to admit to everyone that I couldn't keep going with them. And I decided to make conscious the unconscious realization that yeah, I just, in my last circle with the group, I just shared with everyone, like, look, I've been trying to impress y'all the whole time. I've been trying to seem smart. I've been trying to seem successful. And I've like observed myself doing it now. And I don't like that. And I'm pretty sure it's weirding all of you out. And that's just not what anyone needs. And I've also realized that my body can't do it. And as much as I want to keep going, I can't keep going. So I guess I have to give up on the journey and just, I'm out. And I was crying and I was so sad. And I was like, I wanted to do this my whole life, but I feel like I'm letting people down and blah, blah, blah. And the response was so beautiful. Everyone said, no, we've needed you on this journey. And you being able to see these things in yourself is the victory. And that makes you human. And that's what we all need to be doing. And they said, you will still be with us and we will speak your name into the fire and you will be with us on top of the mountain, even if you're not actually there, right? My waveness, my essence will be there, even though my particle needs to go somewhere else. My body needs to be tended to. Yeah, and actually the point of this video was going to be something that I haven't even touched on, so this will be more for the writing, I guess. But in the ancient significations, Mars represented war, yes, but Mars represented the losing side. As I mentioned, Venus was victory. Mars, or Ares in Roman pantheon, Mars represented the losers, the conquered, the ones defeated in battle by the victorious Venusian Roman army, conquering the world, right? Once empire came into play, once the ego came into play, once the small storyline became about the victory of one specific group of people over others, then all of a sudden it wasn't about let's all work together for the fulfillment of the larger soul mission of like keeping the world going. Then it was like, well, now there's winners and losers, and Mars is the loser and Venus is the victor. And so we're going to try to only have Venus experiences and never have Mars. And Mars became the most hated character in the pantheon and the most hated sign in the zodiac. And if you look at some of the Hellenistic astrologers' interpretations, um, the things they say about Mars are horrible. Mars represents all the worst stuff of humanity. They don't like Saturn either. Because Saturn's limitations, Saturn's our human bodies, Saturn's restrictions, Saturn's time and space. But the glory of Rome is infinite. The glory of the individual human under capitalism is infinite. The American dream, the American illusion. Um, yeah, the delusion of what we've been told Venus represented and Mars represented, and the truth. Um, and this concept of winners and losers, right? That you're only a winner if you get to the top of the mountain. You're only a winner if you're the hero, achieving all of the things, getting all the coins, defeating all the armies. Yeah, there's also a whole kind of subplot about siblings of Mars, Eris, the goddess of discord, who everyone blamed for starting the Trojan War, which maybe they did, but it was to expose the hypocrisy of the Roman plutocracy, the government by the wealthy, the government by the privileged. Pluto represents power, um, and power that comes from hidden sources, which, yeah, maybe that's a wealthy monarchy that's kind of not revealing the fact that they're only maintaining power by like exploiting people. And um, but Pluto also can be like power that comes from the larger big picture story, right? And looking at the interconnection of us with nature. Like there's lots of different ways that these things can go based on our observations and the decisions that we make about what we actually want and how we go about getting it and how we act when we do and do not get it. That's all Mars significations. Um, so, what would happen if we reframed this concept of winners and losers? What if we reframed the hero's journey as a larger story where sometimes we lose and that's actually winning? Because that was my lesson, was that in admitting that I was losing, that I couldn't do it, that I couldn't go to the top of the mountain, I won. And I felt so much love and so much support, and I experienced so much healing in that moment for all of the timelines in my life and other lifetimes where I was trying to perform and be something and feeling like I was failing all the time, no matter what I was doing, whether or not I actually got to the top of whatever mountain I was climbing. I always felt like I was losing. And in losing this time, and by giving up this time, and by admitting defeat, I won more than I have experienced in most of my so-called victories. And it caused so much healing that's still unfolding for me. And I'm just experiencing the resolution of lots of timelines and re-looking at lots of storylines and seeing like, yeah, ways where I was trying to get what I wanted in my individual ego, ways in which I was trying to mm, attach to people who I perceived as having more power than me so I could try to get somewhere, or, to manipulate situations so that I could get my resources met when I didn't have them. And it's like there are systemic reasons that I didn't have them, and there are for personal trauma, family trauma reasons why I didn't have them. But like, yeah, and so this was all subconscious, and I can forgive myself for that. But now that I've seen it, we got to be different, and retrocausally, I can heal those past traumas and forgive myself, and then be able to move forward more clearly. So, yeah, by observing the waves moving through us that come from lots of different places, we can change reality. We can create a new quantum timeline where losers win, where victory looks all kind of ways, and where the story isn't over when we don't get what we want or we don't achieve a certain goal. So the moon right now is in Scorpio and it's moving towards Sagittarius. The moon, our present day experience, the moon, our bodies. The moon relates to nurturance as well. And I'm learning how to nurture myself and be present with my emotions. The moon is our emotional experience. Um, yeah, and according to evolutionary astrology, like the evolution of our soul happens through the moon, these nodal intersection points where our personal feeling, our emotional experience intersects with the larger karmic timelines. And we have these moments of illumination where we get it and we see, we aspect something, where we make something real, where we make the wave a particle, in a quantum timeline of healing is opened up. The soul can move to the next chapter, the next episode, the next story. We don't have to keep replaying that same episode over and over. We don't have to keep bringing the same characters back and playing out similar storylines. Sometimes in series, you're like, haven't we done this one already? I feel like they did some version of this like 4 times. Our lives are like that too. And we don't have to keep playing the same storylines out. Once we see it, once we make it real, then we can change it. But we have choice, right? Mars. If we choose not to change it, then we're going to have to keep learning that lesson. It's not a punishment, even. It's just the reality. Like, we can't move forward until we embody in our emotional experience, nurture ourselves through it, and allow the wave to move through us. Turn it into a wave again. By observing it, making it a particle, we turn it into a wave again. We move it through our bodies, but we have to move it through our bodies. We have to turn it back into a wave. We have to give it a release, a catharsis. There's a reason that the concept of losers originated, because when we see these things, right, when we realize these karmas, these wounds of battle, these shameful experiences, this the knowing that on some level, even if we're being told to kill people in an army, there's a knowing that maybe that doesn't feel right, or that's not necessarily justified. But we do it anyways. Um, if enough of those experiences accumulate and there's no release for them, if they're never made physical and concrete, and we just keep playing them through, like they're gonna come out in some form. And that's why we've always had these collective rituals in society, right? Of release, whether it's like sacrifice or a sports game or an election, like if we're not consciously working with these patterns and seeing our individual role in the larger story and how it all fits together, then we got to blame it on someone. There's got to be a loser. There's got to be a reason we're feeling bad and we're not winning. And it's time to evolve past that. I think we've played that timeline out enough. There's a reason a certain president likes to talk about losers a lot, because that's how he sees himself. subconsciously or maybe consciously. Um, Something we're seeing, aspecting in another situation or person or being means it's something within us that's resonating with that, that's bringing it into some level of our consciousness. And it means it needs to be moved through, engaged with. Yeah. So there's lots of different ways we can do that. There's lots of different ways we can move through trauma. Again, like through some of these therapeutic techniques. And there's an element of it that just has to be the subconscious moving it um, through the physical body. So dance and shaking and tapping and walking and communing with nature and even like food experiences, grounding. Like there's lots of different ways of creative practices, art, like taking the painful experience, giving it a witness. It's all about the witnessing. That's what allows it to be grasped, seen, and understood, but it has to be released as well. We can't just keep holding on to it. Or it keeps it that particle, right? It keeps it static. We stay stuck in the underworld. Yeah. So let's let the losers win. We exile the parts of our psyche that we think are undesirable. We exile the parts of our experience, of our body, of our society that we think are undesirable, that we think are losers, that we think are not achieving, helping us achieve the larger purpose. But that's looking at way too small of a timeline. Yeah, what if we let the losers win? What would happen if you flip the script on your most exiled parts? What would happen if the parts that you've been most ashamed of, the experiences, the behaviors that you least want to admit, that you least like about yourself, what if you decided that those were just timelines you were playing out, that that was actually you doing what you thought would resolve the situation in the moment, that you thought that that was what winning was, and that at one point it was what winning was, or we wouldn't have done it. But who was defining what that win was, right? And what was the context? And okay, maybe it was to stay safe in a traumatic situation, and that was winning then, but now it's different. And that doesn't further the evolution of the relationship we're in or the path of growth that our soul wants to take. Okay, I'm now just rambling. I don't know if any of this makes sense to anybody, but they're just things that I am working through myself and that I wanted to share. And I'm so grateful that I went on my hero's journey and I failed because that was the greatest victory. And I am experiencing peace much greater than if I would have made it to the end, pushing through, pushing my body, pushing away the feelings of my physical experience, pretending to be something. That's not winning. Not really. All right, everybody.